back, everyone. This is Just Two Assholes Fantasy Football Podcast, episode 14. I am Matt Bowen.
And I'm Daniel Powell.
And this week we're going to talk about the trades that happened today. Since it was trade deadline, we're recording Tuesday night. So the first one we want to talk about, let's just start off at the top of the list. Where's it at? All right, so the first one I have is the Redskins trading for Packers safety Clinton Dix. So they traded for Clinton Dix. Let's see what they got. Just a 2019 fourth-round pick. So right now, Clinton Dix in 2016 was a Pro Bowler. He's been pretty decent for the Packers this year. They must have some young talent on the team, and this just makes the Redskins defense, which is turning scary, even scarier.
Yeah, so Clinton Dix is the number one PFF-rated free safety right now. So them only getting a fourth rounder for him is kind of surprising. It makes me wonder what the Packers are doing. It seems like their new GM, Brian Gutekunst, is just if someone doesn't want to be there, he's just going to trade him for whatever he can get, which is a little damaging to the team, I think, but also a good strategy because it's something that they haven't done in years. Under Ted Thompson, they never did anything like this. They just kept everyone every single time, no matter if they were a locker room cancer or anything like that. So they must have some pretty good free safeties coming up through the woodwork, but this really, really helps that Redskins defense, which is already looking really, really strong. So if I'm a fantasy football player, this trade to me screams that I need to get the Washington Redskins defense and start them probably every single week because their run defense was already top-notch, holding Zeke Elliott and who else was it?
Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley.
And yeah, so all three of them, they held them to less than 100 yards combined. So that run defense was already amazing, and now their pass defense gets helped out a lot by adding a really, really good free safety. So this is going to be a strong defense for the rest of the year, and they might be my pick to win the NFC East now.
Yeah, I mean, they're matching it up with the DJ Swearinger, which is pretty solid safety. He's top five, playing top five, at least this year. And so the Cowboys added wide receivers, the Eagles added a wide receiver, so Redskins decided they didn't need wide receivers, so they decided to pick up a safety to try and compete against those wide receivers that the other teams have added. So I like this for the Redskins, not so much for the Packers. I mean, they did get a fourth-round pick. This guy was in the last year of his deal, so they must have known, hey, this guy's going to demand a bunch of money, so hey, let's trade him, try and get something back for him because we're not going to pay him in the offseason.
Yeah, and this makes the AFC a lot, or the NFC, sorry. This makes the NFC a lot of fun to watch because it looked like it was sort of just going to be the Rams running away with this division, but now the Redskins are looking like a team that can probably compete. I don't know if they're good enough to beat the Rams yet and make it to the Super Bowl or anything like that, but I think they could earn themselves maybe a first-round bye week. Probably not, but I think that they win the NFC East with this trade. But on top of that, staying in the NFC East, Golden Tate was traded to the Eagles.
Yep.
So this has a lot of fantasy implication. This helps Golden Tate's stock a lot, I think, and it hurts the stock of every Eagles receiver except for Alshon Jeffrey probably. Alshon Jeffrey is still going to be that outside target, red zone target guy. He's still going to see all of his normal targets and receptions. But the other wide receivers on the Eagles have to get downgraded now, and I think this hurts Zach Ertz's value a little bit as well.
Yeah, this definitely knocks down Aguilar and Jordan Matthews' stock down a lot. And on the other side, for Detroit, it raises Marvin Jones Jr. and Galladay up a lot, pretty much. They must like what they're seeing in Galladay, and just like Clinton Dix, Golden Tate is in the last year of his deal. He's 30, so he is right around the age where wide receivers start to drop off. But he's been solid these past, pretty much ever since he came from Seattle in Detroit's defense or in Detroit's offense. And this just gives Carson Wentz another piece, another weapon to use in the passing game, and it improves their wide receiver unit as a whole a lot more. There's just going to be more mouths to feed, like you said. All the other wide receivers on the Eagles, seems like their stocks are going to go down a little bit, but overall as a team, this is a great move for them. And they know they have to compete with the Rams, with the Saints. They know that they have to do something better. They couldn't get a running back, which we've been saying that they're going to need because they can't. Seems like they're going to have to rely on Smallwood and Clement. But this definitely helps their wide receiver core. For like I said, for Detroit, they must believe in Galladay, and he's been showing up. His stock is going to go up. It seems like with Kerryon Johnson, they got to keep him in the run game. He is a great pass catcher as well. So Detroit did have a little bit excess for wide receivers, and the only reason that I think this makes sense is they get a third-round pick back and they have Rudy Galladay. Other than that, if they didn't have Galladay or a young wide receiver coming up, this would not make sense for them. But hey, I think this is pretty good for both teams, especially getting a third-round pick.
Yeah, it makes me a little worried about the Lions' offense as a whole because this is a big piece to lose. But Kenny Galladay can definitely fill those shoes, I think. And yeah, you're right. He is a really young, really talented guy. But this excites me a lot for Carson Wentz and for Golden Tate. This makes both of them much better fantasy starters than they already were. Golden Tate was sort of sitting on that borderline about whether or not you start him every single week right now. He's had a couple disappointing weeks, but he's a really solid receiver. And in that Eagles offense, I think he's a must-start every single week now because he's just a solid possession receiver who's going to be there. Anytime you need a 5-6 yard, maybe to 10 yard pickup, he's going to be there more likely open, and he has very, very sure hands. I like this trade for the Eagles a lot. For the Lions, I guess it makes sense. I like it for them less. They did get a third round pick out of it though, so that helps them a lot. But if Golden Tate would have left in free agency, they might have got a third round pick next year as a comp pick anyway. That just moves that third round pick up to this year. But yeah, for the Eagles, I think this is a great trade, so good job there. Sticking to wide receivers, Demaryius Thomas got traded to the Houston Texans. They lost Will Fuller for the year, and this was sort of their way of replacing him, I guess. Demaryius Thomas is getting a lot older now. I think he's not nearly as good as Will Fuller was, but he is more of a possession type guy than Fuller was. So the combination of Hopkins and Thomas now could be pretty solid. I think this helps Demaryius Thomas's value as well. We have one guy in our league who was holding on to Demaryius Thomas for the longest time, and I think this makes him borderline startable. What about you?
Yeah, this is a good trade for pretty much for both teams. They knew on Denver's side, Sutton is that number 2 wide receiver. Sanders is just exploding this year. Thomas, his time was up in Denver pretty much. And it's funny that his first start with the Texans is going to be against Denver in Denver. So, but on Houston's side, with Will Fuller going down with a torn ACL, they had to do something. And Demaryius Thomas, he's not the speed guy like Will Fuller was anymore. He's not the big play guy. But like you said, he's the possession guy. He can get you those 5 to 10 yards when you need it. He's not going to get 100 yards per game like he had been when he got his big contract. But it just gives you another big body jump ball guy in the end zone for red zone offense too. So I like this for both teams. It was weird. So this happens a lot in the NFL and people really don't notice. So he was traded and a 7th round pick was sent to Houston, and then a 4th round pick and a 7th round pick was sent to the Broncos. They just traded 7th round picks. Pretty much it's Demaryius Thomas, who's 30, for a 4th round pick. So it's kind of similar what Golden Tate was traded for. But yeah, I like this a lot, and the Texans needed this. They're on the uprise, and with Fuller going down, they had to add another wide receiver, and it seemed like Demaryius Thomas was the right one.
Yeah, and so Tate traded for a 3rd, Demaryius Thomas for a 4th. This makes sense because I think they play a similar position and skill set right now, in that they're both possession receivers who aren't going to pop off the giant plays, but Golden Tate is the better receiver right now, and so them trading a 3rd for him versus the 4th for Demaryius Thomas makes sense.
Yeah, the biggest thing with Thomas is the last 2 years he's just dropped so many balls. It seems like his hands have gone away, where Tate, his hands are sure. You know, if you throw it to him, if it gets anywhere around him, he will catch the ball. So yeah, I do like the trade better for the Eagles. But Demaryius Thomas, the Houston Texans, definitely needed him.
Yeah, and Cortland Sutton is currently a free agent in our league. He's only owned in 12.3% of ESPN fantasy leagues.
I'm trying to pick him up.
Yeah, this makes him a must-grab and probably a must-start as at least a flex position player now, because the Broncos like to throw the ball. Case Keenum has been throwing it close to 30 times per game, so not every single one of those passes can go to Emmanuel Sanders. So this helps Cortland Sutton probably get into that 10 target sort of range where he could be seeing 7 to 8 receptions per game and probably close to 100 yards. He's a big-bodied, great red zone target guy who is much in the mold of a young Demaryius Thomas. So I like this for his stock a lot, and he's someone that I'm going to be trying to add on the free agency wire, and everyone else probably is too.
Yeah, so for Sutton, so he's averaging 4 or 5 receptions a game. Thomas was averaging 7 to 8. So take those 7 and 8 and give it to Sutton. That's around 10 per game. And yeah I see his stock going up a lot. And damn you for calling him out because I already have a waiver claim for him. So the next trade we're going to talk about is the Rams. Like they need any more better players.
Jesus.
I mean, they traded for Jaguars Dante Fowler Jr. So he hasn't really done anything besides get hurt since he came into the league. But look at the Rams' defensive line now. They have 4 first-round picks. 4. They have Aaron Donald, Sue, Fowler, and Eric Brockers, which a lot of people forget. 4 first-round picks on their line starting. This is insane. Like they needed to get any more nastier. So we'll see if Dante Fowler Jr. He's not going to get double teamed. He's not. And it turned out that he was kind of fighting with Ngakwe after the last game. So he's not happy there. So they needed to trade him out of there. And like I said, after drafting him number 3 overall, they really haven't done any. He really hasn't done anything for Jacksonville. And he got traded for a 2019 third-round pick and a 2020 fifth-round pick. The Rams are win now. They're all in this season. They know a bunch of their guys had big money guaranteed next year, or not guaranteed, but option next year. We know that all these players for the Rams, at least on the defense side, won't be there next year. So they got to win this year. So I think this picks up good. He's pretty much a rental. So he's only for the next 6 or 8 games plus the playoffs because we know the Rams are going to be in the playoffs. So the Rams are in win now mode. And for the Jaguars, hey, he really hasn't done anything for them. They have a stacked defensive line as it is. So this helps them get a couple more picks and maybe they can get a quarterback.
Yeah, and this is how you sell out for a Super Bowl.
Yep.
Like, in the offseason, they go get Sue, knowing that they're not going to be able to keep him long-term, but he's going to help out that defense. I think if you're the Rams defense owner in fantasy, you're smiling ear to ear right now. You're just loving this trade.
Yeah, definitely. Fowler, so he had 8 sacks last year, which is decent for – it's not number 1 defensive end for a team, but, hey, it's good for a number 2 or number 3 guy. And really, he could be a number 3 or number 4 guy on that defensive line. Like I said, he's not going to see any double teams because that's all going to go to Donald or Sue. They're going to have to pick their poison there. So he's going to get a lot of one-on-ones versus the right tackles. And, yeah, this could be great for him and definitely great for the Rams. Let's see. Are we missing any other? Oh, so this one's pretty funny. So after Sunday night's debacle with Ty Montgomery, he gets traded to the Ravens. And I think, for a 7th round pick in 2020.
Yeah,
so
2020.
It was pretty much, hey, take this guy. We know you need help. The Ravens, they do need help at running back, but I don't think this really does anything for them. It gives them a pass-catching running back, but yeah, I don't have too much to say for this.
If anything, this bumps down Javorius Allen's stock a little bit, but they didn't really have a pass-catching back. I guess Javorius Allen might have been that guy, but he was more of a goal line, red zone type back. But this does give them a weapon out of the backfield to use in the passing game. Outside of John Brown, their receivers haven't been amazing. Michael Crabtree's had a decent year. They could line Ty Montgomery up in the slot quite a bit and throw him the ball 3-4 times a game. I don't know if this makes Ty Montgomery any more startable than he was. He wasn't that startable to begin with. But this does help that Ravens offense, giving them another weapon that other teams have to worry about. So fantasy-wise, I don't think this does a whole lot for anybody. But real-world football-wise, I think this helps that Ravens offense quite a bit.
Yeah, and with Aaron Jones really showing that he's the number 1 running back for Green Bay, there's not going to be a lot for Ty Montgomery there. So it's good for him to move on. He needed to. And let's just hope that he's not returning any kicks for the Ravens. I think that all does it for the trades that we got for today. So we're actually going to move into our top 5s. So let me pull mine up.
Yeah, and we'll be doing our top 5s a little bit different in the past couple weeks. So as this podcast sorts of evolves episode to episode, our segments will evolve as well. So we were doing top fives before where we just rattled off what we thought our top 5 starts at each position were in fantasy, but the problem with that was they were all pretty obvious. We weren't actually giving any good information to anyone because you were probably starting all those guys either way. So we're still going to let you know what our top 5s at each position are. We just aren't going to focus and analyze on them as much. And we're going to go into a little bit more of the sleeper picks and maybe some tough decisions on your roster that you might have to make. So, hey, should I be starting this guy or this guy sort of thing, where like it's Saturday night and you're still, ailing over it, like, oh man, which one of these guys is going to have a better game? That's where we want to try and start helping you guys out a little bit more. So starting at quarterbacks, I'll go over my top 5 first. My top 5 goes Cam Newton, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, because he'll be in my top 5 no matter who he plays every single week, I think. Number 4 is Jared Goff, and number 5 is Kirk Cousins.
We're pretty similar. So I'm Cam Newton, Mahomes, Goff, Rodgers, and Brady. Because they're playing Green Bay, and Goff put up a obscene amount of numbers against Green Bay. So, yep, that's my top 5. You guys all know that you should be starting them if you have them.
Yeah. So going into quarterbacks where you might be questioning whether or not you should start them, one guy that I really like this week is going to be Derek Carr. Derek Carr is playing the Niners defense this week, who has just been a giant fantasy help to every opposing quarterback. And so right now, Derek Carr is not owned in our league. There are a couple teams that need a starting quarterback this week. So Derek Carr, I think, is the top guy that they should be looking at. What do you think?
Yeah, and like you said, a good opponent. He played great last week. 240 yards, 3 touchdowns, and some rushes, which he got 27 points, which to me, trade away Amari Cooper, you would think his production would go down, but with Marshawn Lynch also going on the IR, they didn't have as much as a running game, and he showed up. He did his stuff, and that bye week must have helped. And it also helps that they're playing San Francisco, which they can't stop anyone right now. They're 26th in the league. Against Green Bay, they gave up 33 points. Against the Rams, they gave up 16, but that's because Todd Gurley went off for 200 yards. And then for Arizona, 19 against Rosen. Against Josh Rosen, which, hey, he's a great young talent, but he still put up 19 points against the 49ers. I think Derek Carr could at least get that.
Yeah, so if you're a team this week wondering, hey, should I start Drew Brees against the Rams? I would say that you start Derek Carr over Drew Brees this week, honestly. That Rams defense is really good, and they just added a pass rusher. I think Brees he's still going to have a Drew Brees-like game. He's going to have a high completion percentage, but I just don't know if the touchdowns and stuff are going to be there for him. And I like Derek Carr more than Drew Brees this week. I like him more than Flacco. I like him more than Phillip Rivers. I like him more than Ben Roethlisberger. So there's quite a few guys who are considered to be top-tier fantasy quarterbacks that I like worse than Derek Carr this week.
Yeah, I think that's a good call because, the Rams, their defense has just been stout the last few weeks. And, there's a lot out there that I don't like. Like Matt Ryan, I wouldn't play him against Washington. We already talked about how the defense is actually pretty damn strong. This is a guy that, hey, if your quarterback's having a touch matchup or your quarterback's on bye and you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, pick up Derek Carr or my guy. So I'm going with Russell Wilson. So last week, he came back, really. He had 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a couple rushes, and he had 22 points. So the last 3 weeks that he's played, he had 19, 20, and 22. So he's not the top quarterback or top 5 fantasy-wise that he has been these past couple of years. But he's playing the Chargers. So they're right in the middle of the pack, 16th. In the last couple of weeks, 16 points, 12 points. But you got to look who that they played against those teams. San Francisco, we know Berthard's not too good. Oakland, that's when Derek Carr sucked. And that was in London, too. They only scored 3 points. Cleveland, with Mayfield, he's young. That was the week that they traded away the running back Carlos Hyde, only got 11 points. And then Tennessee, we know how really toxic that offense has been this year with Mariota. So the numbers are a little skewed. I think they're closer to the 20 or 22 ranked as far as defenses against quarterbacks. But yeah, so I like this a lot, and the added value with his legs as well. So what do you think about Russell Wilson?
Yeah, so both weeks the Chargers played a quarterback that is on Russell Wilson's level. So week 1 against Kansas City, they gave up 28 points to Patrick Mahomes. Week 3 against the Rams, they gave up 25 points to Jared Goff. So I think Russell Wilson is on that tier. He's maybe not Patrick Mahomes' tier as far as fantasy players go, but I'd say he's definitely on Jared Goff's tier right now. And so I really like this pickup as well. ESPN is only projecting him for 16 fantasy points. I think that's a bit low. They should be safely projecting him at 18 and expecting more like 24, 25 fantasy points out of Russell Wilson this week. His biggest issue is that he's such an efficient passer, he doesn't have to throw the ball 40 times a game. So he's only throwing the ball 20, 25 times a game for 250 yards. But luckily, the redeeming quality is he's throwing 2 or 3 touchdowns every single game as well. So if this game turns into a shootout where Phillip Rivers starts to go off, which might not be the case because Seattle's defense has been really strong against opposing quarterbacks and opposing offenses fantasy-wise this year, but if that does happen, this could be a game where Russell Wilson just goes crazy and throws for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then rushes for another 60 yards on top of that and is the best fantasy quarterback this week. It's not a situation that would surprise me, so I like this pick a lot.
Yeah, so Russell Wilson last week, so he passed 14 for 17. So he only threw the ball 17 times and still got 22 points. He had a perfect passer rating, which is rare to happen in the league. So everything's going up for him. Like you said, he's so efficient, but with his efficiency, he gets big results. Completing 14 passes for 250 yards, like that, damn,
yeah.
that's amazing. And with his running, just potential there, and he can get a rushing touchdown as well. Like I like him for his sleepers. So if some of those other quarterbacks like Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco, if you have him just like Derek Carr, maybe look for Russell Wilson. He is a free agent in our league, so he might be in yours as well.
Another guy who's a free agent, and this one is a real just kind of dart throw, honestly. This is if you're really digging deep for a quarterback, but I like Alex Smith this week. They're facing Atlanta, who has one of the worst pass defenses in the league. They're 30th in ESPN fantasy leagues against opposing quarterbacks. Alex Smith hasn't been the Kansas City Alex Smith this year. He's only averaging 14 points per game, but he is projected at 17.1, so even ESPN sees the potential for him to score a bit more points this week. He's projected for more points on ESPN right now than Russell Wilson is, which is kind of mind-blowing, but he's also projected for more than Phillip Rivers is, and Alex Smith is a guy actually I like more than Phillip Rivers this week, and more than probably a Joe Flacco, or that mid-tier of fantasy starting quarterbacks. I like Alex Smith more than them this week. So if you're really hurting for a fantasy quarterback, I could see being happy starting Alex Smith this week.
Yeah, this is kind of like my sleeper that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of a dart throw. It doesn't help him that Adrian Peterson has turned the time back and has just came and performed. With their offensive lines, they have 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick on that line. And so he has a lot of time. So it's not going to have to be this dink and dunk with Alex Smith. He's getting more time to read, and he's been pretty efficient. His completion rate is in the low 70s, which is pretty damn good for a quarterback. And you're going against Atlanta's D, which is 30th in the league. So against Eli Manning. So just think of how bad Eli Manning has been this year. They gave up 19 points.
Yeah.
You can get 19 points out of Alex Smith.
Alex Smith is a better quarterback right now than Eli Manning is. And he hasn't shown it so much this year, but he can run the ball also. So if he got a rushing touchdown or even like 40 rushing yards, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yep. His mobility definitely helps, just like the last 2 guys that we talked about. So we'll go with my guy. It's kind of a homer pick, Brock Osweiler. So they're playing the Jets, which I don't like. I mean, the Jets aren't very good at all. Their defense is right in the middle. So their defense is ranked 17th. In the league. So, like I said, right in the middle, and it helps that Devontae Parker is starting. So I'm kind of picking through the weeds here a little bit, and there he is. I couldn't even find him. That's how bad he is. No, so he's a free agent. So he's averaging 7 points a game because that's because he hasn't played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in one he came in and relieved Tannehill, which he only had 5 points. So against Chicago's defense, which has been pretty decent, he had 25 points. Detroit, he had 17, but then Houston, they couldn't do anything against Houston. He still threw for 240 yards and a touchdown, or no touchdowns, and so he got 7 points. So it was just Miami in a whole. Houston defense is pretty amazing this year. I would take them top 5 in the league right now for defensive wise. So Brock Osweiler, like I said, it's kind of a homer pick. But if you're in need, like I said, your quarterback's on bye or they have a bad matchup, this is someone that maybe you want to look at. So they do have some explosive playmakers on that team, but going against the Jets, I like this matchup for him. I think he can maybe get 2 touchdowns and 300 yards, which is around 15 points in our league.
Yeah, and one shocking fact is Brock Osweiler has not thrown an interception yet. And that was kind of Brock Osweiler's calling card on most of the teams he's played on. He was sort of a gunslinger who threw a lot of interceptions, but it seems like Adam Gase has kind of reeled that in a bit and made him more of an efficient passer. This one, I honestly like this less than the Alex Smith pick, but if Alex Smith gets picked up and you really need a quarterback, I wouldn't be mad if someone started Brock Osweiler. It's not someone that I would be happy about starting, I think. But I understand the pick. The Jets defense has been giving up some points to fantasy quarterbacks. They gave up 21 to Mitchell Trubisky. They gave up, 21 to Case Keenum. I think if Case Keenum can put up 21 fantasy points on this defense, then Brock Osweiler probably can as well. So this is a pick that, while it's more of a dark horse pick, I kind of like it. This is one in daily fantasy where I would choose him to save myself a little bit of money and sort of bet against the chalk. But yeah, good pick.
All right, so we're going to move into our wide receivers group, or running back. Just like the quarterbacks, we're going to list our top 5. Won't really spend too much time on that, and then we'll go into some sleepers that we think that could help you win this week. So my top 5, I got Gurley, McCaffrey, Hunt, Gordon, and Cohen. So against New Orleans for Gurley, they're 6th in the league, but that offense is just so amazing. He's going to be, like I said last week, he's going to be my number 1 running back all week. Or all season until he does something wrong. McCaffrey I like because they're playing against Tampa Bay. He's really their Swiss Army knife of their offense, so he's going to do great this week. Going into Hunt, he's really pretty much solidified himself as a top 5 or top 6. He's definitely debatable in that top 5 running back position this year. And going against Cleveland, which is 25th against the run. Melvin Gordon and Cohen for the Bears, they're just great matchups this week, going against Seattle. And then Cohen playing, I actually didn't write it down, but they are 20th in the league. Let's see who the Bears are playing this week.
The Bears are playing against Buffalo.
Okay, yeah. So Buffalo has let up a lot of yards, especially pass catching. We saw how great James White was last week. That's my top 5 for running backs.
Yeah, and our top 5 is actually exactly the same this week. I've got Gurley, McCaffrey, Hunt, Gordon, and Cohen as my top 5. And for all the same reasons you said, each one of them just has a really, really good matchup right now. My number 6 would probably be like a James White or something like that, just because he's shown that every single week he's going to be an 8 to 9 reception kind of guy for close to 100 yards. And it looks like he's going to score a touchdown every single week, either rushing or pass catching as well. It's sort of ridiculous. But I'll go into my first sort of sleeper pick this week that is someone who I might start over some of the at least mid-tier guys, and that is Nick Chubb. So Nick Chubb is playing against the Chiefs this week. I don't like what is happening in Cleveland, and it scares the crap out of me because Greg Williams is going to be their head coach. I'm not even sure who their offensive coordinator is going to be. I don't know if that's been reported or not at all. But if you have a defensive-minded head coach, his first thought is going to be run the ball. It seems to happen with every defensive head coach in the league. They want to pound the rock and weaken the opposing defense and then pass the ball. So I think Nick Chubb sees a lot of carries this week against a defense that hasn't been able to stop the run against anyone. Kansas City has given up, 28.5 points to Denver running backs, 34.5 points to New England running backs, 21 points to Jacksonville running backs who aren't that good. The only team they've done well against is Cincinnati in what was sort of a fluke game where the Chiefs defense showed up and really, really stopped everything on that Bengals offense. So this is a spot where I really like Nick Chubb, and I would probably start him over, maybe over Chris Carson, Lamar Miller, Kenyon Drake. I would start Chubb over those 3 guys this week, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick, and the new head coach or interim head coach definitely makes sense with him being defensive minded, saying, "Hey, go run. I don't worry about the passing game at first." And yeah, Nick Chubb, ever since Carlos Hyde has been traded, even a little bit before that, they kind of shared carries, and now it's his job to lose. Going against Kansas City too, yeah, you talked about how bad their rushing defense is, 31st in the league. This is definitely a great matchup for him. And it's funny you mentioned Kenyon Drake because that's who actually I'm going to talk about. So they're playing the Jets, which the Jets are 19th in the league against the run. And so the last 2 weeks, so against Minnesota, that's when Latavius Murray blew up. He had 96 yards on 20 carries with 2 touchdowns. And then last week, they gave up 31.5 points against the Bears. So that was when Cohen did his thing. It seems like that they have an issue against pass-catching running backs. He had 121 yards and a touchdown. So I'm not seeing Kenyon Drake getting 20 catches or 20 rushes, but he might get in that 15 to 18 touches range because he not only runs the ball, but where he is most dangerous is in his open space. So what I've talked about him in the past a little bit is Frank Gore is better on the north to south game, but Frank Gore's not going to outrun anyone. He's not going to use his agility to juke people. He's going to run through people. So Kenyon Drake, what he does is when he gets matched up with a linebacker, when he has a bad matchup against him, they look at him and he gets the ball and he doesn't get taken down by the first player. So last week against Houston, he had 12 rushes. Okay, so like I say, he's not going to get a lot of rushes. He had 12 rushes for 58 yards and a touchdown. But he added 2 catches for 40 yards and another touchdown. So the passing game is where I can see him take advantage of that Jets defense.
Yeah, and you bringing up that pass-catching ability of Kenyon Drake, because it is his biggest playability is in the pass-catching game out of the backfield. It makes me sort of like him more than Nick Chubb, honestly. Just the fact that the Jets gave up so many points to Cohen, and I think they gave up a bunch of points to James White in a previous matchup, makes me like Kenyon Drake a lot. And yeah, he's someone I would be starting over a lot of the mid-tier running backs. I'd be starting him over a Matt Breida. I'd be starting him over Kerryon Johnson, over Aaron Jones, over Tevin Coleman. It's really, really a good spot for him. And it's someone who was drafted really early, who people, when they drafted him, thought he was going to have a huge year. And he really started slow, and he's bounced around a lot of fantasy leagues rosters so far, but it looks like he's finding his home in that offense with Brock Osweiler at quarterback. They have to rely on him more because Osweiler can't be trusted to get the ball to receivers as consistently as Tannehill was.
Yeah, and especially with Miami losing wide receivers. Stills is going to be out again. Albert Wilson's on the IR. Yeah, they got Amendola and Devontae Parker stepping up, but hey, he can step into that slot. He might a lot of times they use Frank Gore and Kenyon Drake and have Kenyon Drake out wide. So he is a big pass catching running back, like I said before. He is not just run game. And yeah, I like this matchup a lot. Who do you have for your second one?
My second one is going to be Isaiah Crowell. So this is a running back that I hate starting in fantasy football because I just don't think he's a good running back. But he has a really nice matchup this week where he has to see a lot of touches because Bilal Powell is out for the year. Now, that happened last week as well, but that was against the Bears, who have a really strong run defense. Khalil Mack was back at full strength, and that really showed. He had 13 carries for 25 yards last week, but Miami's defense, who they're playing this week, is 29th in our fantasy league against opposing running backs. So I think even with the Jets getting blown out against the Bears, he still saw 13 touches. I think this game is going to be much closer of a game. And I think he's going to see probably close to like 18 to 20 touches probably because their backup running back behind him, Trenton Cannon, I believe, was an undrafted free agent, really not that great of a running back, and he's been forced into that spot. He does have a lot of speed, which is nice, but Isaiah Crowell is going to be who they rely on 99% of their running downs, I think. So this is a spot where he could see a lot of touches and probably get a couple touchdowns because of that, and it's just a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, I like this pick a lot, Isaiah Crowell. So Miami, they cannot stop that run. They really can't. They're 29th in the league, and it sucks as a Dolphins fan to say that. But the lowest scoring running back position against us is 19.5 points. So at least 20 points. Hey, if you're running back core, you're going to score at least 20 points against the Dolphins. And Isaiah Crowell with no one else behind him, he's probably going to get the full 20. And with the Jets too, because I watched them a little bit here and there, and it seems like what they like to do is they like to start with their running game to get Sam Darnold more comfortable in the game, give him a little passes here and there at the beginning of the game. But they like to feed through the running game first to get him more comfortable and then unleash him. So it's a funny little fact. So the last 4 weeks, their first 2 plays in the first half and first 2 plays in the second half have been rushes. So they like to just start the halves out, get Sam Darnold a little bit comfortable, and yeah, I like this matchup a lot against a horrible Miami rushing defense.
So who comes in at your number 2 then?
Okay, so let's see what I got. So I actually have Aaron Jones. So he is the number 1 running back there, and they're going against New England, which New England's defense is 16th, so right in the middle. But against Buffalo, they let up 17 points. So this is so these sleeper picks are someone where, at least for me, I'm looking to get somewhere between 12 and 15 points.
Yeah.
Someone that you need help, and someone will do better than just leaving the spot open. So Aaron Jones, let's see what he had the last couple weeks. So I know he had a touchdown last week against the Rams. He had 12 for 86 and 1 touchdown, and 0 receptions. So he doesn't get thrown the ball a lot, but their offensive line is decent. It's probably top 15 in the league, but with Aaron Rodgers, you know the defense can't stack the box. You know the corners and safeties, they have to stay honest. So most of the time, it's up to his offensive line and for him to find the holes that the offensive line makes and just shoot right through them. And he's turning really into a power back. So he's not really, doesn't have that much agility, but he can hit the hole hard, and it takes more than one guy to tackle him. So yeah, I'm looking for him to get 12 to 15 points this week against New England, which has not been good against the run.
Yeah, and this is just a really good spot for him. I like this pick a lot. If he was on my team, I think I'd probably be starting him at least in my flex spot. The team he's on in our league has to make the decision this week of starting Aaron Jones or Doug Martin. Doug Martin saw quite a few touches last week and 7 fantasy points. Aaron Jones saw 15 fantasy points. So I think Aaron Jones is the easy decision in that lineup, but it's still sort of a decision you have to make. It's not just a gimme. And I would definitely be starting Aaron Jones here, knowing all of those facts. It's a really great pick.
Yeah, what team is that has to play him? Sorry.
That is, I ain't no Fournette son. It'd be Trevor's team.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I'm just looking and see. Yeah, so right now he's starting him in his running back position. Yeah.
And on top of that, Ty Montgomery is gone, so someone has to be the pass-catching back on that team now, and Aaron Jones is the best pass catcher they have out of the backfield now. So he's going to see quite a few more receptions, I think. He saw 2 receptions last week for 0 yards, but look for more of a 4 or 5 receptions for maybe 15 to 20 yards. So that's 3 extra points, 4 extra points if you look at it that way. So this is a spot where he could easily see 15 fantasy points again. I like that pick.
Okay, nice. So right now we're going to move into our wide receivers. So this one, I don't think we're going to match up just because of my last pick. So first overall, we got Adam Thielen, number 1 overall fantasy wide receiver this whole year. So, and then I got Hill. I have Devontae Adams. I have Mike Evans. And then I wrote Los Angeles Rams receivers because they're playing the Saints. So I like all of them. Cooper Kupp's supposed to be back. So it's take your pick. You got Cooks, Woods, or Cooper Kupp. So that's my top 5.
Our top 5 is very similar because my number 1 is Adam Thielen. My number 2, this is going to make you smile, is Cooper Kupp. So you wrote Rams wide receiver. I wrote Cooper Kupp because he's supposed to be back this week, and if he is the number 1 wide receiver on that team. He's looking a lot like Adam Thielen when he's fully healthy, and I like his game a lot in that offense. Jared Goff loves throwing him the ball. Sean McVay loves finding new and interesting ways to get him open, so I really like him this week. My number 3 is Tyreek Hill. Number 4, Julio Jones, who, hey, he isn't going to catch a touchdown, but he's probably going to catch 15 balls for 100 yards. And then at number 5, I have Devontae Adams against the Patriots just because he's going to get fed the ball a lot as well.
Yeah. So we match up pretty evenly there. So I'll go with my first sleeper for wide receivers, and I've already talked about him. We'll talk about him some more. Devontae Parker. So he had a little issue at the first, pretty much his whole career. He just can't stay healthy. But when he is explosive. So let me try and find him. Where's Parker? All right, let me just type him in. So last week, he didn't have a touchdown, but Osweiler did overthrow him a wide open Devontae Parker in the end zone. So he could have had a touchdown, but without a touchdown, he still get you 16 points. So he had 6 catches for 134 yards. And that's coming off of, he hadn't played the previous 4 weeks because of injury. So now he's fully healthy. He's playing against the Jets, which I've already talked about a little bit against Kenyon Drake. But they're even worse in the passing game than they are in the rushing game. So against wide receivers, 27th in the league. Last week against Chicago's wide receivers, 23. Minnesota's 43. Indianapolis, 33.5, 44. It just keeps going on and on. So their lowest scoring wide receivers against them was Miami with 20.5 points, but Devontae Parker did not play in that game. So I like him a lot. Brock Osweiler, he is the number one wide receiver, a nice big-bodied guy. He's tall, he's 6'5", he's fast, he's light, he has the agility, he has all the tools. His big thing is just health. Just stay healthy, and he's getting more and more chemistry with Brock Osweiler. And, yeah, I look for a big game for him.
Yeah, and what Parker did last week is what everyone sort of thought Parker was supposed to do from the time Adam Gase became the head coach. Because everyone knows Adam Gase loves to throw the ball. And with Kenny Stills being out and all the injuries they have on their offense, that passing attack has to get going at some point, and it has to go through Devontae Parker and probably Kenyon Drake. Because Amendola is going to see his targets, but he's not a big play guy. He is a slot possession receiver who's going to see a bunch of 3 to 5 yard catches and maybe get you a little bit of yak. But Devontae Parker is their deep threat guy. I mean, 6 catches for 134 yards. That is exactly who Devontae Parker should be and really should have been for the past 2 years. So yeah, he is a free agent right now and someone that teams should definitely be looking at picking up. That mid-tier of wide receivers right now, you're looking at like Brandon Cooks, Kenny Galladay, Devin Funchess, Sammy Watkins,
Jordy Nelson.
Yeah, I'd be starting him over a Jordy Nelson. I'd be starting him over probably a Kenny Galladay. I'd be starting him probably over Demaryius Thomas, John Brown. So I like him more this week than all of those guys, which means that he is at least flex rosterable and startable in pretty much every league, especially PPR leagues.
Yep. Yeah, this is definitely a big pickup for me. Or hopefully I get him. I already got a waiver claim for him. And I like him a lot. Like you said, Amendola is not going to be that big play guy. And with the wide receiver injuries that they've had, they need someone to step up. And he was the guy last week, and hopefully he can be this week. Who do you got for your first sleeper?
My first sleeper is actually going to be Devin Funchess. Because he's had such an up and down year, he only had 3.5 points last week, but the 2 weeks before that was 15 fantasy points and 15.5. And they're playing Tampa Bay this week, who we've talked about it over and over again on this podcast. Start your offensive players against Tampa Bay. Devin Funchess is a huge-bodied receiver, and there's no one on that Tampa Bay defense who I think can cover him on a 50-50 ball. So as long as Cam Newton remembers that Devin Funchess is alive and running routes, I think he has a pretty big game here. He's not a 100-yard receiving threat type of guy, but he is a 2 to 3 touchdown threat kind of guy because of that huge frame that he has. I think Carolina's probably going to blow Tampa Bay out of the water, but Ryan Fitzpatrick is starting as well, so this could be more of a shootout type game. I like Devin Funchess a lot in this matchup, and I kind of wish he was on my team this week.
Yeah, so he's had at least 4 catches and 53 yards of his last 5 contests besides last week. And yeah, with Cam Newton, we both have him ranked number 1 in our rankings this week, and going against Tampa Bay's defense, they're just horrible. That they fired Mike Smith, their defensive coordinator, and that didn't seem to help at all. So, yeah, I look at him. Last week, Baltimore is so tough to play against. That's kind of an outlier for me. The other 2 past weeks, he's had 15.5 and 15 points against Washington and Philly. And Tampa Bay is definitely a worse defense between Washington and Philly. I think that Carolina's going to go up big in this game. And, yeah, I think a lot of it can be Devin Funchess. Because DJ Moore did explode last week, but he's not the consistent player that Devin Funchess has been, or more reliable. And with Greg Olsen coming back too, there's a lot of mouths to feed, but Devin Funchess has been that guy that keeps getting fed. So yeah, like you said, he has a big frame. He's good in the red zone, and he's not a big play dude. But when you're in your opponent's territory on the other side of the 50, that's when he shows up and he'll help you out, especially against Tampa Bay. They're just horrible this year on their defense. So my guy that I got, the next one, Sutton. So we already talked about him a little bit with the trade with Demaryius Thomas. So Cortland Sutton, let's see where he is at. All right, I'm going to have to type this guy in again. He's so far down on the projections this week.
Yeah, which just means ESPN hasn't updated their projections since these trades went through, which is a little upsetting and something that definitely should have happened.
So right now he's projected 9 points. So the last 3 games he got 8.5, 8.5, 9. So he's averaging 6 so far. But like we said, he's averaging 4 to 5 catches a game. But Demaryius Thomas was averaging 6 or 7. So if you give those targets straight to him, maybe not all will go to him, but he'll probably get at least 9 to 10 catches for 80 to 90 yards. So last game he had 3 for 78. He is a big playmaker. And with Emmanuel Sanders getting that number 1 cornerback, so he's not going to be double teamed at all. I mean, he's a rookie, so not a lot of people are going to double team him. But with Emmanuel Sanders on his team, as long as Case Keenum doesn't throw it to the other team, I think he'll have a big week. They're going against Houston, which is tough. The 7th in the league. But last week against Miami, they did let up 32.5 points against the wide receivers. So that can just show you where it's up and down for Houston from week to week. They did 22 against Jacksonville, 16.5 against Buffalo, 9.5 against Dallas. So they show up for good teams, and then they don't show up for bad teams. It seems like, I'm not saying Denver's a bad team, but they're not the top 10 in the league or top 15 in the league right now. And with the Demaryius Thomas trade, his production should just skyrocket. It really should. So I like him against Houston this week. So he's my last sleeper.
Yeah, and Sutton is a guy that I have a waiver claim on right now because if I got him on my team, I'd be starting him over Julian Edelman and Sammy Watkins, I think. Watkins is a tough one because they are playing Cleveland, who is 25th in the league against wide receiver 2s right now. So he could have a nice game. He had a huge game last week with 26 fantasy points, but I think I like the consistency of Sutton more than Sammy Watkins. And with Demaryius Thomas being gone, you know that he's going to see more targets. He's already at that right around 9 fantasy points per game the past couple of weeks. So you know that Case Keenum at least likes throwing him the ball. And with Thomas gone, he's just going to see much more shares of that offense and much more shares of those targets. And so, yeah, he's someone that if he's on your team, I think he's at least an immediate flex starter, if not wide receiver 2 starter. That's someone that everyone in every fantasy league should be trying to grab right now, unless you're like a couple of the teams in our league and your wide receiver core is just absolutely stacked. My number 2 this week is Michael Crabtree. Let me type in his name here and find him. So Crabtree this week.
Playing Pittsburgh.
Yeah, sorry, I gotta adjust my filter settings here. All right, so yeah, Crabtree against Pittsburgh, who is the 28th ranked defense against opposing wide receivers. This is a game that the Ravens have to win in order to try and win that division. It's really a 3-way race right now between the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Steelers. I think the Ravens or the Steelers are probably going to be the team to win it. The Bengals' offense is really scary, but their defense isn't, whereas the other two teams have pretty solid defenses. But the Steelers do not against opposing wide receivers, which is why I like Crabtree here. John Brown is going to see a lot of the focus and the double teams because he's the more consistent and bigger threat wide receiver, which opens up Michael Crabtree to see a lot of targets this week. I don't think Crabtree's not going to pop off and get you 20 fantasy points this week, but if he saw 6 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown, I think that's probably the baseline of what you're hoping for from him this week. He's a possession type receiver who knows how to get open in the end zone, and this is just a spot where I think he does pretty well.
Yeah, and so the team that he's actually on in our league, Team Cortez, is starting him in his flex, which is a good call. So right now he's starting him over Larry Fitzgerald, which, yes, I would say okay. Deshaun Jackson's an interesting question, but yeah, I would lean more onto Crabtree. It does help Jackson that Fitzpatrick is back, but yeah, I would lean more on Crabtree. So we already see someone in our league making those hard decisions against Larry Fitzgerald, which is on a bye, but then Jackson, and then he's also got Gronk on his bench, who he could throw into his flex. So yeah, if you're looking for someone that could help you out, get that 10 to 12 points, because like you said, Crabtree's not going to explode. He's not a big playmaker anymore. He's more that middle of the range guy where, hey, he's probably, like you said, 6 catches, maybe 50 to 80 yards, and if he gets a touchdown, it's just icing on the cake. It's just a bonus. So, yeah, I like this going against Pittsburgh because their defense is 28th against the pass, and Baltimore has to win this game. They beat up Pittsburgh pretty bad last time, so let's see if they can do it again.
And then we will be skipping tight ends this week just because the top 14 tight ends for projected points this week are all owned in our league. So basically everyone who has a tight end or 2 on their roster is going to be starting them. And there's just not a lot to talk about for fantasy-wise as far as tight ends go. There's a huge drop-off after the first 12 or so guys, where it's suddenly guys who see like 1 or 2 catches a game for something like 14 or 15 yards. And just a couple of them randomly get a touchdown like Kroom on the Bills did on Sunday, or Monday night, I should say. And there's just not a lot to talk about there. Defenses, there's not a lot to talk about either. There's a couple sleeper defenses that I'd be looking to possibly pick up this week. 2 that I really like are the Titans playing against Dallas, just because I don't trust Dallas's offense at all. I think they're going to be forcing the ball to Amari Cooper a lot this week now that they traded a first-round pick for him, and I just don't think he's a very good receiver or that he cares about football at all, so that's a defense I like a lot. And then I actually like the Chiefs' defense a lot this week against Cleveland because Cleveland lost their head coach and their offensive coordinator. That offense is going to be abysmal, and the Chiefs' defense, while it has been very shoddy, they scored 10.5 fantasy points last week and are now averaging 7.8 fantasy points per game. So I like the Chiefs' defense, at least this week.
Yeah, I agree with that call on the Chiefs. The Chiefs, yeah, definitely against Cleveland. They have no head coach, a defensive-minded head coach. And with Baker Mayfield, he's shown flashes of why he's been the number 1 overall pick, but he really hasn't been too consistent. He's given some turnovers this year. So, yeah. Let's see who else we got. I really don't see too many. As far as a sleeper would go, maybe Panthers against Tampa Bay, but you know that Fitzpatrick is going to light it up. They are 15th against defenses, so pretty much middle of the road. Really, I don't have anyone else to talk about on defense.
You could get really ballsy and start the worst defense in the league against the worst offense in the league right now in the Raiders versus the Niners.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting play, I think, because C.J. Beathard is going to throw a couple interceptions to any defense that he plays. And he's actually injured, and there's rumors that the Niners' third-string quarterback will be starting this week, and that would be Nick Mullins. If Nick Mullins gets the start, the Raiders' defense goes from the worst defense in the league to probably one of the best, at least this week, because Nick Mullins is a very, very bad quarterback. He's been on the Niners practice squad all year and got bumped up to the roster in the past couple of weeks because Beathard has been banged up. So if you wanted to get crazy, maybe you're a Raiders fan, Team Cortez, pick up the Raiders defense and start them against the Niners, and I honestly think they get you positive points and maybe better than average points as far as fantasy defenses go. That's a fun pick for me.
They're definitely not going to get you negative points.
Yeah, they're not going to get you negative points. That's not. I love Kyle Shanahan. He's an offensive genius, but with the talent he has in San Francisco right now, he can't design an offense that will get an opposing fantasy defense negative points. You can't do it. All right, so moving on from our top 5 and sleeper picks, we will go into a brief recap of what happened last week. So let's move on to the scoreboard.
Yeah, so let's start with our records last week.
Yes, we both went 5-1 last week, correct?
Yep. Yeah, so I am 25-17 so far this season, and you are 23-19. So we traded picks, traded losses, so you didn't make up any ground. So the first one, I'll start talking about my matchup. And damn, this was a close one. So I won 102.5 versus 100.5 in Dalvin the Chipmunks. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and neither team, myself or Dalvin the Chipmunks, really could do any better because my bench had half a point because I had a lot of players on bye. And Dalvin and the Chipmunks had 2 points on their bench. So it's not like we could have helped each other out or helped our team out if we switched players out, left a lot of points on the board. So Todd Gurley, thank God I did win because I might have been a little bit more angry that you stopped and didn't run in the touchdown or run in the end zone and get that touchdown. But yeah, so the biggest scores for me was Todd Gurley with 30 points, and then Philip Lindsay for 17.5 points. My team was pretty solid besides my last 4 slots. So Trey Burton got 2.5. John Brown got 3.5. Lions defense, bad call on me. Russell Wilson took off. I had 0.5 point. And then Dan Bailey only got 2 points. So Will Lutz got 16 for Down in the Chipmunks, where Dan Bailey only got 2. I was so scared during that game, but hey, I pulled it out, and this is a win that I definitely needed this year.
Yeah, this was a really fun matchup to watch throughout the entire weekend because you guys were sort of just going back and forth, and you were neck and neck the entire time. If Dalvin and the Chipmunks could have got a couple more points, if Cam Newton didn't forget that Devin Funchess existed, he probably would have won this matchup. But yeah, he got 26 points out of Patrick Mahomes, and then 23 out of DeAndre Hopkins, and the rest of his team outside of Will Lutz didn't do a whole lot. Bears defense got him 8, and then 7.5 from George Kittle. Kittle's been just great this year as far as fantasy tight ends go, and just tight ends in general go. I think this is a year where he's probably a Pro Bowler, so shout out to him as a Niners fan. I love that man. We'll move on to my team, the Meme Team Dream Team versus the Tobias Anal Rapist. My team blew the fuck up this week, and it's about goddamn time. So this was just the first week, really, where I started all the right players. So I got 25 from Jared Goff, 19 from McCaffrey, 19 from James White, 26 from Mike Evans, 26 from Watkins, 5 from Kyle Rudolph, 17.5 from Tariq Cohen, 18.5 from the Patriots defense. Shout out to the Patriots defense. They weren't doing great all game, and then they had that giant pick 6, which really helped me out, and then 6 from Harrison Butker. And then on my bench, Julian Edelman got me 15.5, and normally that's a good starting wide receiver points, but with 26 from Evans and Watkins, I didn't need it.
Yeah, it's amazing how many points you scored, and I'm so sorry, Tobias Anaribus. You got 123.5 points in our league, which is half-point PPR, and lost. So you just had a bad matchup, and it's not like you could do too much. I mean, Mark Ingram 9.5. You wouldn't have started. I wouldn't have started Jalen Richard over him, and you didn't. You had 10 points on the bench. Besides that, there's no real moves you can make. It was just a tough matchup. Carson Wentz got you 21.5 points. Latavius Murray got you 16.5 because he had over 100 yards, and then Will Fuller. So he got 20.5 points before he got injured. Maybe. No, you still wouldn't have won. I was going to say maybe if you didn't get hurt, you might have won, but no. So Will Fuller, you're going to have to find a replacement for him. But hey, Panthers defense get you 10. That's solid. And then Gostowski got you 14. So hey, it's a tough matchup. But yeah, this was a great win by you, Meme Team.
Yeah, if I just need my team to produce like this every week from here on out, seeing as how I'm 3-5. Moving on to I Ain't No Fournette Son versus the Dick Dangla. Dick Dangla pulled this win out 111 to 100.5. This is the one matchup this week that I picked incorrect. I picked Fournette Son in this matchup because I thought Aaron Rodgers was going to have a much better game against the Rams than he ended up having. He only scored 15 fantasy points. I also said Kareem Hunt would probably score 30 fantasy points. He didn't. He still had a good game at 16.5, but it wasn't nearly as big of a game as I thought he was going to have. Doug Martin got him 7. That's not great, but it's solid. Tyler Boyd at 23.5, 11 from Tyler Lockett, 5.5 from Vance McDonald, 6 from Josh Gordon, who would have got more if he started that first quarter, but he was late a couple times this week apparently and got benched that first quarter. The Cardinals defense got him 9 points, and then 7 from Robbie Gould.
Yeah, so this was a tough matchup for you. So you still want to beat me, though. But yeah, so Aaron Jones was on your bench with 15 points. You still would have been 8 points short. So tough matchup for you. Dick Dangla, hey, thank God I picked you this last week. So Tom Brady got you 12. He's been a little below average, but hey, you know he's not going to be a big fantasy quarterback. Alvin Kamara turned it back on, 22.5 points. TJ Yeldon, even though Carlos Hyde was there, he still showed up, got you 11.5 points. Devontae Adams got you 15.5. Emmanuel Sanders did have a low week, but you still pulled off the wins. He only got 7 points. Jared Cook showed up, and we talked about him showing up last week with Amari Cooper getting out of Oakland. He got you 15 points. That is solid. Hopefully he can produce around 10 to 15 these next couple of weeks. Jordan Nelson got you 1.5 though. So we hit on Jared Cook, and I believe Jordan Nelson. We thought he was a sleeper. We didn't pick him as a sleeper, but hey, good thing we didn't because he only got 1.5 points. Steelers D going against Cleveland got 11 points, and then Gano, which I think he only scored 1 point the previous week. Yeah, 1 point. He turned up with 15 points. So hey, great job by you. And thanks for the win, man.
Yeah, well, what's funny about that is I believe in the podcast the last week, we told him to start Jordy Nelson over Willie Snead. It ended up not mattering because he got the W anyway. But if you listened and started him because of that, sorry, man. It looked like a much better spot for Jordy Nelson than it did for Snead. Willie Snead only got 7.5 points, but when you only get 1.5 out of Jordy Nelson, you're expecting a lot more than that when Amari Cooper's gone. But hey, at least you're not me, and you didn't start Martavis Bryant in daily fantasy thinking that he would at least see some snaps, and he didn't. So, moving on to the Jimmy G Spot Rockers versus Sack Lives Matter. This is the one that I got right and you got wrong, yep. I believe. So I picked Sack Lives Matter in this matchup. They ended up winning 90 to 86.5, so a really low-scoring fantasy matchup. Mitchell Trubisky got him 21.5 fantasy points, 14.5 from Saquon. Kenjon Barner, 0 fantasy points. The week before, he saw a ton of carries and did really well, but it's Bill Belichick, so you never know which running back is going to see the bulk of the carries there. I think Cordero Patterson ended up having the most or second most carries on that offense, and he's a wide receiver, so Bill Belichick, you never know what the fuck he's going to do when Sony Michel is injured. That's a rough spot. AJ Green, 15.5 points. Marvin Jones Jr. got 26.5 fantasy points. 0 from David Njoku, who made both of our top 5s last week. And I'm calling that the reason why Todd Haley got fired. The fact that David Njoku got 0 receptions against a defense that was the worst in the league against opposing tight ends, that is mind-boggling, and it's got to be one of the main reasons why Haley got fired, along with Hugh Jackson. Robert Woods got 9.5, and then 1.5 from the Colts defense, and 2 points from Matt Prater.
Yeah, with Kenyon Barner, I would drop him. Sony Michel's healthy again. Yep. He's going to come back in.
100% droppable.
And it just shows that Sony Michel didn't play last game, and they didn't use Kenyon Barner at all. I think he got 2 rushes for 4 yards. Yeah, 2 rushes for 4 yards from really the only, besides James White, a healthy running back. And they just don't like him. They didn't give him the ball at all. But yeah, sorry, Jimmy G Spot Rockers. I picked you, and I kind of convinced Daniel to pick Sack Lives Matters last week. So Drew Brees only got you 6 points, and this was rough. This was just because
that's got to be the main reason he lost here. Is Drew Brees only getting 6 points?
He only had 120 yards and 1 touchdown, and he did throw a pick, so that didn't help you out at all. Nick Chubb got you 8, which with him being the number 1 running back, you look to see a little bit more out of him. Kerryon Johnson. So this is interesting. He only got 8 carries in the game, where the previous week, let's see how many he had. He had 19. They forget he was back there. They kept giving the ball to Blunt and Reddick. It's like, no, Kerryon Johnson is the best running back on your team. They were playing against Seattle, which they were down in the game, so they were having to throw the ball a lot. But still, give the ball to your best running back on your team. Even in the pass-catching game, he's a great pass-catching running back, but he didn't get anything. So I'm sorry, man. I was like pretty much the rest of the people that follow football and hoping and thinking that he was going to get more touches. Odell did have a touchdown and got 17 points. Chris Godwin got you 6 points, but you didn't have any other wide receiver that was playing on your bench, so hey, you couldn't make any moves. Zach Ertz got you 10, which is pretty low for him, but they were playing against Jacksonville. Kenyon Drake got you 21 points. Hey, he showed up in that garbage time against Houston. The Texans defense, so they were up big, but the end score was 42 against 23. So they only got 2.5 points. I didn't think Texas defense really did anything. They had one interception, but no sacks. So great. And then Jason Myers got you 5 points. So hey, this was a low-scoring game. I'm not saying Sack Lives mattered. I don't think he would have won against any other team in the league. So he would have beat Team Cortez, but that was the only one. So it was lucky for you that you were facing Jimmy G Spot Rockers, but hey, it's just a matter of the draw. So you got to win the games that you're put up against, and that's what you did this week and gave him my loss. Go ahead.
Up next, we have Wide Right versus the Lucky Neckbeards. Lucky Neckbeards are the hottest team in the league right now at 7-1, and they won this week, 127 to 101.5. It seems every single week, like 125 points is the Lucky Neckbeards' floor. It's kind of ridiculous. He got 20 points out of Kirk Cousins and 18.5 out of Adam Thielen. So his quarterback-wide receiver combo got him 38.5 fantasy points. James Conner almost outscored both of them combined with 34.5 fantasy points. He didn't make my top 5 last week. He made yours, so props to you for calling that one out. Marlon Mack did make my top 5 last week and got 27 fantasy points for him. Alshon Jeffrey, 5 fantasy points. Eric Ebron, 10.5 fantasy points. Sterling Shepard with 5. The Ravens defense surprisingly got negative 1.5 in that blowout loss to the Carolina Panthers. And then Greg Beleg got 8 fantasy points.
Yeah, so James Conner, hey, he got that revenge game versus Pittsburgh. He got 200 yards and I think a touchdown. So, hey, I called that pretty good. LaShawn McCoy, so for wide right, it was a rough game for him. He had 12 rushes for 13 yards. He ended up with, I think, 95 or 96 yards in total for his receptions, but only got you 12 points. Cam Newton, he showed out, got you 27 points. He did what he could. You really had no one on your bench really to fill in your lineup at all. You had Randall Cobb for wide receiver, but your wide receivers did pretty decent. Antonio Brown got you 22. You weren't going to start Randall Cobb over T.Y. Hilton. He was supposed to be back. And against Oakland, too, that was kind of sad. He only got you 3.5 points. Jordan Reed, which is a so-so tight end, he got you 6.5. Taylor Gabriel got you 7 in your flex. You like to see a little bit more out of that. But, hey, you scored 101 points, or 101.5 points. But, you're playing the toughest team in the league so far. And he showed up once again, so it was a tough matchup. But, sorry, wide right. We both picked Lucky Neckbeards to win.
And then finally, we have the biggest blowout of the week, Stairway to Evans versus Team Cortez. We both picked Evans in this matchup because it seemed like the most obvious pick of the week, honestly. And the score ended up 130.5 to 89.5. So Stairway to Evans put up 130.5 points with Jameis Winston getting benched and only scoring 8 fantasy points. Joe Mixon, 26.5. Lamar Miller, 19. Surprisingly, Lamar Miller finally showed up. Michael Thomas, 10.5. Juju Smith-Schuster only got 5, made your top 5. O.J. Howard, 14 fantasy points. Adrian Peterson, 24.5 fantasy points. And Adrian Peterson is just showing everyone that age is just a number for him. It's really incredible this year, so props to him. The Redskins defense, 15 fantasy points, and then 8 from Dustin Hopkins.
Yeah, so Stairway to Evans, this was a solid week for you. Hopefully you have a down week next week because I'm playing you. But, yeah, great win this week. To go over to Team Cortez, so Deshaun Watson, he had one of the quarterbacks that was in your top 5. He got him 30 points, so good pick by you. David Johnson got you 11. We were watching that game a little bit because they were playing the Niners, and they're starting to line him out in the slot position for wide receivers, so that's good. That's at least a good movement progression for David Johnson, so hopefully he can get more points in the weeks coming up. Chris Carson got you 18 points. Brandon Cooks got you 8.5. It's kind of sad to see Doug Baldwin only getting you 3 points. With Russell Wilson going off, too, you would think that some of that, at least some, would go to Doug Baldwin against Detroit. But nope. Benjamin Watson got you 0 points for New England. It might be time for you to find... Okay, so you have Gronk on your bench. Throw him back in there in the lineup next week. Michael Crabtree should have a good week this week, but he only got you 4.5 points. The Rams defense did solid against Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, got you 8.5 points. And then Fairbairn for Houston, which he had a lot. It was a high-scoring game, but all he got was extra points with 6 points. So, yeah, tough loss by you. So we'll break down the standings just a little bit real quick just to see who is winning. So I know. So I'll start with my division. So Lucky Neckbeards, we already talked about how great his team is. He's 7-1. Stairway to Evans is 5-3. Dick Daniel is 5-3. And, hey, look at me. So one Tyreek Hill, Sack Life Matters, and Team Cortez are all tied 4-4. So it is getting a little bit more even in our league, where at the beginning of the league, a lot of us was at 1 win or 2 win. There was about 3 or 4 of us in my division. So, hey, it's coming up a little bit. Now, hopefully I can get in that number 2 or 3 spot next week.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy right now because there's no taco in this league. Every single team has 3 wins or more. My division, the leader in my division is 4-4. And then 3-5, 3-5, 3-5, 3-5, 3-5, including my team. That is kind of insane. So in this league, the top 6 teams, regardless of division, will go to the playoffs. So division rankings matter less and less this year, but you still do play your division twice in a year. So there is some rivalry at least to be had there. But it looks like outside of Lucky Neckbeards, every other playoff position is kind of wide open. Stairway to Evans is 5-3, and Dick Dangle is 5-3. But Dick Dangle's team has shown some holes in the past couple of weeks. He's gotten the wins, but they've been sort of just scraping by. Stairway to Evans seems to put up a lot of points every single week, but he did have that one down week where he only scored 80. So you know that his team is at least beatable. So outside of Lucky Neckbeards, I think every team in this league is beatable, and I could see any single team right now making the playoffs. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, so we'll talk about the highest scoring team, which obviously is Lucky Neckbeards, and then the lowest scoring, it looks like, is actually I Ain't No Fournette. That's insane. Is that true?
Yeah, he's the lowest scoring team and leading his division.
The leader in your division is the lowest scoring team overall in our league. Hey, good job, Trevor. You're doing something right. You're getting those W's. But yeah, just showing its points against too. So there's some teams that have higher wins than other teams, but they have been scored lower against. So that definitely can show that you just have some hard matchups, and hopefully that the records show who are the best teams at the end of the year. So I think that's all we got for this week.
I think that's going to do it for episode 14 of our podcast. I'm Daniel Powell.
And I'm Matt Bowen.
And just remember that 2 assholes are better than 1. Thanks, guys.